So, in contrast, what do you think of the situation in Japan, with where everything is actually inside?
Vous pouvez répéter la question, s'il vous plaît, on ne vous a pas très bien entendu. Mademoiselle, la dernière question.
Professor gave the example of...
Oui, oui, répétez, répétez. Oui, oui, s'il vous plaît, merci.
Okay. Professor gave the example of Italy, which took credits from other countries, which was a disaster. So, in contrast, what is his opinion on Japan, where everything is inside?
Ok, une autre question, s'il vous plaît. Une troisième question à la B2, avant de donner la parole au professeur, s'il vous plaît.
Merci. Je me présente. Aimé Ben Ali du ministère de l'Investissement et de la Coopération internationale.
Rapprochez le micro, rapprochez le micro.
Tout d'abord, je remercie M. Stiglitz pour cette présentation. C'est un honneur pour la Tunisie qu'il soit auprès de nous. Une question concernant la libéralisation des comptes des capitaux. On sait dans ce contexte de libéralisation, on parle beaucoup, même souvent de libéralisation des comptes des capitaux, c'est-à-dire la libération du dinar tunisien. Je voulais poser une question, cela ne pose pas un problème pour la Tunisie, notamment pour les fuites des capitaux à l'étranger. Et merci.
Pour l'investissement à l'étranger? Pardon?
La fuite des capitaux à l'étranger.
Ah, la fuite des capitaux, merci. Une autre question, s'il vous plaît? Salle B2.
Professor, I want to stability, financial stability, especially in the case of Bargains Bank, Iran in 2010.
Problème de micro, on ne vous entend pas.
I want to ask about speculation and especially in the case of commodities in the future markets or options. For example, in the case of...
C'est bon ou pas? Oui.
We assist to speculation. In fact, there is also a problem of agency problems in the underlying assets of Nikkei 225. Also, we assist to volatility of assets, of underlying assets, especially in the case of Iran with manipulation of electricity future markets. I want to ask also about political relation in the case of Iran, which we assist bankruptcy of 2001.
Please, relation between?
The CEO of Iran and former President Bush.
On va donner la parole à monsieur le professeur Stiglitz pour une première série de réponses et après on reprend les questions. So maybe you can answer this first question.
Okay. Maybe I should put there. So let me try to answer a few of these questions. Islamic finance has gotten a lot of attention. A few countries, particularly Malaysia, has succeeded in making itself a center for Islamic finance and has used it to attract a lot of business. a lot of financial activity. I think the two general principles, though, are important, or two or three. One of them is Islamic finance, like any other kind of finance, needs strong regulation. That in the absence of that, you're going to wind up with the risk of exploitive activities. That it doesn't, just because it has the word Islamic finance, doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be ethical on its own. That there will be people who will take advantage of others. So that you need a regulatory framework. And the second general point is that most individuals require a return on their capital. And so, in one way or another, Islamic finance is going to generate a return. And that it may take a different form, but there is going to be a return on capital. Now, the advantage of a lot of the Islamic finance is that it can be designed as more of an equity, and risk sharing is a better instrument for stability. But one of the cleverness of financial markets is that it often is difficult to tell whether they actually really do involve risk sharing. So one of the things you have to recognize is that one can circumvent any intention with complicated financial structures. There was a question about Japan. I'm not quite sure what the question is, but let me answer two. Were there countries that succeeded better in the financial crisis? And the answer is yes, there were several countries. The emerging markets like Brazil, China, India did much better, and a few other advanced industrial countries like Canada and Australia. And most of these countries had something in common, which is good, strong financial regulation. The details of the institutional arrangements differed, but most of these countries also had good, strong, forceful, intellectually independent central bankers. So, for instance, Governor Reddy, who is the central banker in India, was forceful when the financial sector wanted to be deregulated. He said no, and he stood up to the bankers successfully, unlike Greenspan and Bernanke that gave in to the pressures from the financial sector. So I think that is a key characteristic of the countries that were successful. Japan has been going through an economic slowdown for now more than 2 decades. But the interesting thing about the economic slowdown in Japan is that it has caused much less stress than the much shorter slowdown in, say, the United States. And that's for a couple reasons. The first is they managed, even with the slowdown, say, over 2 decades, to maintain a relatively high level of employment. The unemployment is only around 5%, whereas in the United States, the unemployment rate has been much higher. And secondly, they have a broader sense of social consensus, a broader safety net, and that's meant that fewer people have been left on their own. So that while the economy has been weak, the consequences of that have not been hard on many individuals. There was a question about the risk of capital flight for Tunisia, And this is a question which, a concern in a world of capital market and financial market liberalization, especially for all economies, as we've seen in Spain, Greece, and I think it highlights two important points. One is the importance of maintaining stability and confidence in the institutions. What's happened in Spain and Greece is a beginning of an erosion of confidence in the key institutions. And that's partly because the European framework is, I think, fundamentally flawed, and Germany has not been able to respond to those fundamental flaws. And then secondly, it speaks to the importance of having the appropriate regulatory structures. Chile is a small country that for a very long time managed to have stability in its financial markets by not having full capital and financial market liberalization. So they had a very open market, but they knew how to manage what's called capital account management. So they figured out a variety of measures for stabilizing capital flows. So it's not easy, but it can be done. And the final question was about speculation and agency problems in the corporation. The basic problem here is a problem that was highlighted actually 80 years ago by two economist lawyers, Burl and Means. At the end, the basic economics that was taught and is still taught in many universities really goes back to the 19th century, where you have corporations, companies that are managed by the owners. And then you have no agency problem. If you own your own firm, you make a mistake, you overpay workers, you pay the consequence because you're the owner. You both manage and you own the firm. And if you make a mistake, you bear the consequence. But modern capitalism is marked by a separation between ownership and control. The shareholders don't really control the company, even though legally they do. And you see this very critically in a debate going on in the United States and the UK about the pay of managers. If you had somebody work for you, you would assume that you have the right to determine their pay. But in most corporations, the shareholders have no right to say anything about the pay of the CEO and the executives, even though the CEO is supposed to be working for the shareholders. It seems very strange, but that's the laws in most Western economies. More recently, some countries are trying to pass laws that are called say and pay, that the shareholders should have some say in the pay of the managers. And the managers have said, if you do that, it will be the end of capitalism. Well, it would be the end of capitalism as they know it, because they like the ability to take away a large fraction of the revenues of the corporation for themselves. In the US and the UK, they have now passed laws that give a shareholders the right to express a view, but it's not mandatory. And what we've seen in many board meetings, in many shareholder meetings, what they've said is to the CEOs, you're overpaid. And just